The team stays, you go, Vice President Wilson said, leaning back in his leather chair. I nodded silently, gathering my laptop. The boardroom felt suffocating as I walked toward the door, dignity intact despite the public humiliation. Then came the unexpected shuffle of chairs. I turned to see 11 engineers from our $175 million project standing up, following me out. Wilson laughed dismissively until his phone lit up with a text. As he read it, I watched the color drain from his face. He never expected what came next. 5 years ago, I joined Tech Fusion with dreams bigger than the modest salary they offered. My Georgia Tech engineering degree could have landed me positions at any of the tech giants paying nearly twice as much, but Tech Fusion had something special. Their mission to develop accessible technology for education resonated with me on a personal level. Welcome aboard, Renee, said Thomas Green, the CTO at the time. We've got ambitious plans, and your thesis work on adaptive learning algorithms is exactly what we need. Those early days were everything I hoped for. I climbed the ranks from junior developer to senior engineer within 3 years, consistently exceeding performance metrics and earning the respect of my colleagues. My work on the learning pattern recognition system became a cornerstone of Tech Fusion's educational platform, increasing student engagement by 34%. When Thomas called me into his office last spring, I expected another routine project discussion. Instead, he slid a folder across his desk with a smile. Project Quantum, he said. $175 million budget, revolutionary integrated learning platform. And we want you to lead the engineering team. My heart raced as I flipped through the specifications. This wasn't just another project. This was career-defining work that could transform educational technology completely. You'll need to assemble your team, Thomas continued. 24 engineers, the best we have. Over the next month, I carefully selected each member of the quantum team. Jordan Matthews, a brilliant systems architect with a knack for elegant solutions. Amber Collins, whose user interface designs were intuitive enough for kindergartners, yet sophisticated enough for graduate students. Garrett Powell, our security expert who had previously worked for the Department of Defense. Each person was selected not just for their technical skills, but for their passion and collaborative mindset. We became more than colleagues. Late nights debugging stubborn code, celebrating breakthroughs with pizza parties, and supporting each other through personal challenges forged bonds that went beyond professional courtesy. When Paul's wife was diagnosed with cancer, the team reorganized the workload without complaint. When Amber's daughter was born, we sent meals for 2 weeks. We weren't just building software, we were building a community. 8 months into Project Quantum, we were ahead of schedule and under budget. The adaptive learning algorithms were performing beyond expectations, with early testing showing a 47% improvement in student comprehension rates. The board was thrilled, and whispers of bonuses and promotions circulated through the team. Then came the company-wide email announcing a restructuring of the engineering division. Thomas was taking a reduced role due to health concerns, and Alan Wilson was joining Tech Fusion as the new VP of Engineering from rival company Nexus Tech. Change can be good, I told my anxious team during our morning stand-up. Wilson has impressive experience. Maybe he'll bring fresh perspectives. His first visit to our workspace seemed promising. He asked thoughtful questions about our architecture and complimented our progress. I've never seen such clean implementation of neural network integration, he said, examining our code repository. You've built something special here. The investor demonstration the following week went flawlessly. Our prototype adapted in real time to the learning patterns of volunteer students, providing customized lessons that kept them engaged far longer than traditional methods. The investors were visibly impressed, with several approaching me afterward to commend the team's work. As the room cleared, Wilson pulled me aside, his hand resting on my shoulder. Outstanding presentation, Renee. Truly exceptional work. Pride swelled within me, but it quickly deflated as he continued. I'd like you to meet Eric Davis, he said, gesturing to a man in an expensive suit who approached us. Eric was my right hand at Nexus Tech. He's joining us to co-lead Project Quantum moving forward. Co-lead? I asked, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Eric has extensive experience in educational technology. Having two leaders will enhance efficiency and ensure we meet our ambitious timeline. As Eric shook my hand with a grip that was a bit too firm, I noticed something in his expression. Not collegiality, not excitement about the project, but something closer to satisfaction. Like he had just been handed the keys to a car he'd long been admiring. "Looking forward to working together," Eric said, but the words rang hollow. In that moment, as Wilson and Eric exchanged knowing glances, I realized the ground beneath my feet had shifted. The project I had nurtured from conception was no longer fully mine. This wasn't about efficiency. This was a takeover, and it was just beginning. Eric's collaboration began with him sitting in on all my team meetings. He rarely contributed meaningful input but took copious notes and frequently interrupted with questions that revealed his limited understanding of our architecture. "I'm just trying to get up to speed," he would say whenever I politely pointed out that his suggestions contradicted our established design principles. 2 weeks after Eric arrived, I noticed my calendar no longer included the executive strategy meetings for Quantum. When I asked Wilson about it, his response was dismissive. "Those meetings have become more about business strategy than technical details," he explained, leaning back in his chair. "Eric can handle the technical discussions with me separately. It frees you up to focus on implementation." I left his office with a tight smile, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. Being excluded from strategic discussions meant losing my voice in critical decisions about my own project. Jordan noticed my distraction during our code review that afternoon. "Everything okay, Renee?" I hesitated, not wanting to spread my concerns prematurely, just thinking through some integration challenges. He didn't look convinced, but nodded anyway. "Team's picking up on something. Eric's been scheduling one-on-ones with several engineers." "Did you know about that?" I didn't, and that revelation felt like a stone dropping into my stomach. The following week, I discovered changes to our project documentation that I hadn't approved. The user authentication flow had been completely restructured, moving away from the security-first approach Garrett and I had designed. When I confronted Eric, his response was casual. "Wilson thought the login process was too cumbersome. We're streamlining it." That cumbersome process is what prevents student data from being compromised, I argued. "We designed it that way intentionally, after 3 rounds of security audits." Eric shrugged. "The market cares more about user experience than theoretical security risks." Theoretical. As if data breaches were imaginary concerns. The stress began affecting my sleep. I'd wake at 3 in the morning, mind racing with all the ways the project was veering off course. My sister Ashley noticed my exhaustion when we met for our weekly coffee. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "What's happening at work?" I gave her the abbreviated version, trying to downplay my growing anxiety. "Sounds like classic corporate politics," she said. "Maybe it's time to start looking elsewhere?" The suggestion felt like surrender. I can't abandon the team or the project. There's too much at stake. As the weeks passed, more changes appeared without my input. My innovative algorithm implementation, the heart of our adaptive learning system, had been modified with an approach that created potential security vulnerabilities. I spent weekends fixing these issues quietly, documenting each problem and my solutions. The team was caught in the middle, receiving conflicting direction from Eric and me. Morale began to suffer. Then Jordan sent me a private message one Tuesday morning. "Check the new patent filings. Server cabinet, bottom drawer." During lunch, I slipped into the server room and found the folder. Flipping through the legal documents, my blood turned to ice. The patent application for my adaptive learning algorithm, the one I'd developed before Project Quantum even existed, listed Eric Davis as the primary inventor. My name was nowhere to be found. I sat on the cold server room floor, documentation in hand, as the full reality crashed over me. This wasn't just about taking over leadership. This was theft. Plain and simple. They were erasing me from my own work, preparing to claim my innovation as their own. The room seemed to spin as I realized what was happening. The co-leadership was just a transition phase. Once Eric was positioned as the inventor of the core technology, my role would become redundant. I was being systematically replaced, my contributions stolen in broad daylight with corporate paperwork. My hands shook as I photographed the documents with my phone. 5 years of dedication, countless nights of work, breakthrough innovations that had excited the entire industry, and now someone else would get the credit. Someone who couldn't even explain how the algorithm worked if pressed. In that moment, sitting alone surrounded by humming servers, I felt something shift inside me. The disappointment and confusion crystallized into something harder and clearer. This wasn't just unfair. It was wrong, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Stephanie Barton, TechFusion's HR director. With my evidence carefully organized, I hoped that company policies about intellectual property and proper attribution would protect me. Stephanie's office was meticulously arranged, not a paper out of place. She greeted me with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What can I help you with, Renee?" I explained the situation concisely, presenting the original documentation of my algorithm development alongside the new patent application. As you can see, this technology was developed by me prior to Project Quantum. The company has rights to use it, of course, but proper attribution is being deliberately misrepresented. Stephanie reviewed the documents with what appeared to be careful consideration. Then she closed the folder and clasped her hands on top of it. "I think there might be some confusion," she said in a tone one might use with a child. "Eric has extensive experience with similar adaptive systems. Perhaps you're misremembering some of the collaborative aspects of this development." "Misremembering?" I repeated, stunned by the suggestion. "I have dated documentation, code commits, and research notes going back 3 years. She smiled sympathetically. "Development is a team effort, Renee. Wilson has mentioned you've been struggling with the collaborative aspects of leadership lately." The implication was clear. This wasn't an oversight. It was coordinated. HR was already working from Wilson's playbook, setting up a narrative of me as difficult and territorial rather than as someone whose work was being stolen. That afternoon, 3 more engineers approached me separately with concerns. Amber pulled me into an empty conference room, her usual confident demeanor replaced with nervous energy. "They're changing the user interface flow completely," she whispered, "removing all the accessibility features we built for students with learning disabilities." Garrett cornered me in the break room. "The new security protocols are a joke. We'll be violating FERPA regulations with student data. I've raised it 3 times with Eric, and he keeps saying it's being handled." Paul caught me in the parking lot as I was leaving. "Something's wrong with the new implementation. The system is failing basic regression tests, but Eric says to proceed with the client demo anyway." I spent that night reviewing the code repositories, discovering with growing horror that the critical security protocols I had designed were being systematically removed from the architecture. The client demo was 2 weeks away, and we were preparing to showcase a dangerously flawed implementation of a $175 million project. My alarm went off at 5:30 the next morning, after barely 3 hours of restless sleep. The face in the bathroom mirror looked foreign, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes. I'd lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. A dull headache had become my constant companion. That day, I noticed my name missing from the planning emails for the client demonstration. When I asked Wilson's assistant about it, she looked uncomfortable. "I thought you knew," she said quietly. "Eric will be leading the presentation." Later that afternoon, a notification popped up on my screen. Wilson's calendar had a scheduling conflict, and his assistant had accidentally granted me access to an email thread I wasn't supposed to see. The subject line read, "Staffing changes post. Quantum launch." My hands trembled as I clicked open the message. The email contained a comprehensive plan outlined by Wilson to remove me from the project immediately after launch. Eric would be positioned as the innovative mind behind Quantum's success, and 5 more people from Wilson and Eric's previous company would be brought in to replace key members of my team. The floor seemed to drop from beneath me. A wave of panic rose in my chest, constricting my breathing. I barely made it to the bathroom before the anxiety attack hit full force, leaving me gasping for air in a locked stall, clutching my phone with the evidence of my planned professional execution. This wasn't just about me anymore. My entire team was at risk. The project we had poured our hearts into was being corrupted, and none of us were safe. As I splashed cold water on my face, trying to regain composure, I realized I was facing a choice. I could walk away, start fresh somewhere else, and let them take everything. Or I could fight, not just for myself, but for my team and the integrity of our work. The woman in the mirror looked defeated, but somewhere behind the exhaustion, I saw a flicker of the determination that had carried me through engineering school as one of the few women in my class. The same determination that had earned me this position in the first place. They thought I would quietly disappear. They had no idea what was coming. That evening, I called Diana Williams, my former mentor and now CTO at Brightway Technologies. Diana had guided me through my early career challenges and always offered straightforward advice. "Document everything," she said after hearing my situation. "Every email, every code commit, every meeting, and build internal support. You're not the only one who's noticed what's happening." The next day, I texted Jordan, Amber, and Garrett. Coffee at Riverside Cafe, 7 p.m., off-campus discussion. Riverside Cafe was 20 minutes from the office, far enough that we wouldn't run into colleagues. I arrived early and secured a corner table, anxiety churning in my stomach. They arrived together, expressions serious. Amber spoke first after we had ordered. "Please tell me we're planning a counteroffensive because I've had it with these guys." Jordan nodded. "Most of the team is wondering what's going on. The changes they're pushing through make no technical sense. It's like they're deliberately sabotaging their own project." "Not their project," Garrett corrected. "Our project, which they're taking over and gutting." I shared what I had discovered about the patent filing and the post-launch staffing plan. Their expressions shifted from concern to outrage. "Carrie and Mike are already interviewing elsewhere," Amber revealed. "They don't trust the new leadership." "We need a strategy," I said, feeling more resolved than I had in weeks. "We need to protect ourselves and the integrity of our work." Over the next 2 hours, we developed a plan. Each team member would meticulously document all technical decisions, preserving evidence of the original design and subsequent unauthorized changes. We would create secure channels for communication outside company systems. "What's the end game?" Jordan asked. "Even with documentation, we're up against an executive with the board's ear." It was a valid question. Documentation alone wouldn't save us if Wilson had already convinced leadership that I was the problem. "I'll consult an attorney," I decided, one specializing in intellectual property and employment law. The following day, I reached out to Sarah Baker, an attorney recommended by a Georgia Tech classmate. We met at her office during my lunch break. "Based on what you've shown me, you have a strong case for patent interference," she said after reviewing my documentation. "And potentially for constructive dismissal, given how they're creating hostile working conditions." "What about the team?" I asked. "Many of them are being set up to fail with these technical changes." Sarah tapped her pen against her notepad. "If enough of you are experiencing similar treatment, there might be grounds for a collective action. But that's a serious escalation." "Are you sure you want to go that route?" I wasn't sure of anything except that I couldn't stand by while Wilson and Eric dismantled months of work and stole credit from deserving engineers. Back at the office, I discreetly gathered more information. An anonymous survey circulated among team members revealed 78% were dissatisfied with the current leadership and concerned about the project's direction. Together with my core allies, we created an encrypted repository containing all original specifications and contributions, preserved off the company network. Each day, more team members quietly joined our documentation efforts. While researching Wilson's background more thoroughly, I discovered something interesting. His previous company, Nexus Tech, had failed spectacularly after losing key talent following an acquisition. The pattern was familiar. Come in, replace leadership, alienate original team members, bring in personal allies. The difference was that Nexus Tech had collapsed after Wilson and his inner circle took control. One evening, as I was leaving the office, a woman approached me in the parking garage. I recognized her as Tanya Reed from Apex Solutions, one of TechFusion's competitors. "I don't normally do this," she said, handing me a business card, "but my company is very interested in the team behind Project Quantum. Several of your engineers have been approached already. I thought you should know." After she left, I turned the card over. Written on the back was a note. "Catherine Morgan, CEO, would like to meet. Compensation packages, ready for your entire team." Apex Solutions was desperate to acquire quantum technology, and they were approaching my team members with job offers. The realization struck me with unexpected force. Wilson might control the project inside Tech Fusion, but he had overlooked something critical. The team itself was valuable, perhaps more valuable than the code we had written. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. We might have more leverage than Wilson realized. If the team stood together, we wouldn't be so easily replaced after all. With Sarah's legal guidance, I prepared comprehensive documentation of the patent violation, organizing evidence chronologically, and highlighting the most egregious examples of credit theft and technical sabotage. Before we proceed with legal action, Sarah advised, you should make one final good faith attempt to address these issues internally. I requested a meeting with Wilson, hoping against hope that faced with clear evidence, he might reconsider his approach. His assistant scheduled me for a 15-minute slot at the end of the day. Wilson barely looked up from his computer when I entered his office. Make it quick, Renee. I've got a dinner meeting. I placed the folder on his desk. I've documented numerous instances where my intellectual property has been misattributed and where critical technical decisions have been overridden, creating security and functionality risks. He flipped through the pages with theatrical disinterest. This looks like someone who doesn't understand how corporate development works. Ideas belong to the company, not individuals. And technical decisions are made by leadership, not individual engineers who can't see the bigger picture. The adaptive learning algorithm was developed before Project Quantum, and company policy clearly states that original inventors must be credited on patent applications. Wilson closed the folder and pushed it back toward me. Maybe engineering leadership isn't for everyone, Renee. Not everyone can handle the collaborative nature of corporate work. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. This man had never written a line of production code in his life, yet he was lecturing me about engineering. Collaboration requires mutual respect and honest attribution, I responded, maintaining my composure. Neither of which I've seen from your leadership. His expression hardened. Is there anything else? I gathered my documentation, just that the board presentation is next week. I hope you're prepared to answer technical questions about the implementations you've approved. A flash of uncertainty crossed his face before his arrogant mask returned. That will be all, Renee. Outside his office, I took a deep breath. As expected, the direct approach had failed. It was time for Plan B. The next day, I met with the 18 team members who had joined our documentation efforts. We gathered at my apartment after hours, laptops open and determination on their faces. The executive presentation is in 3 days, I explained. Wilson will be showcasing Quantum to the board and key investors. He'll take credit for our work while introducing changes that compromise the entire system. What's our move? Jordan asked. 2 tracks. First, I've been in touch with Catherine Morgan, CEO of Apex Solutions. They're prepared to offer positions to our entire team if we leave together. The room buzzed with surprised conversations. Second, we attend the board presentation prepared to address technical questions honestly if asked. We don't disrupt, we don't accuse. We simply tell the truth if given the opportunity. And if we're not given the opportunity? Amber asked. Then we vote with our feet, I said simply. We leave together, and we let Tech Fusion figure out how to complete a $175 million project without its core engineering team. We spent the next 2 days preparing. Everyone updated their resumes and had preliminary discussions with Apex. We organized our documentation and prepared concise explanations of the technical issues we had identified. The morning of the board presentation arrived. The executive boardroom was arranged with the board members and senior leadership at the main table and supporting staff, including our team, seated along the walls. I felt the tension radiating from my colleagues as Wilson took the podium. Project Quantum represents the future of educational technology, he began confidently. Under my leadership, our team has developed a revolutionary adaptive learning system that will transform how students engage with educational content. For the next 30 minutes, Wilson presented Quantum as his team's achievement, completely erasing my contributions and those of the original team members. Eric frequently jumped in to explain technical aspects, stumbling through explanations of systems he barely understood. When Wilson opened the floor for questions, Board member Sandra Thompson raised her hand. The adaptive algorithm is impressive. Can you explain how it differs from existing approaches? Wilson deferred to Eric, who launched into a garbled explanation that contradicted basic machine learning principles. I noticed several board members exchanging confused glances. Actually, I said, standing up from my seat along the wall, I can clarify that point. Wilson's head snapped in my direction, eyes narrowing. That won't be necessary, Renee. Eric has this covered. With respect, I continued, addressing the board directly, as the original developer of the adaptive learning algorithm, I can provide accurate information about its innovation. The room fell silent. Sandra Thompson nodded for me to continue. Calmly and clearly, I explained the algorithm's unique approach, its development history, and the extensive testing that validated its effectiveness. I then highlighted the recent changes that compromised its functionality and security. These modifications create significant risks for student data protection and system performance, I concluded. They violate educational privacy regulations and undermine the core value proposition of the product. Wilson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is completely inappropriate, he sputtered. Renee is disgruntled because she struggles with collaborative leadership. Board Chairman James Walker raised his hand for silence. Are you saying the current implementation has security vulnerabilities, Miss Edwards? Yes, I responded. And I have documentation showing how these vulnerabilities were introduced after the original secure design was overridden without proper technical review. Wilson slammed his hand on the podium. This is absurd. You're just trying to undermine progress because you can't adapt to change. Is it also absurd that my name was removed from the patent application for an algorithm I developed before Project Quantum existed? I asked, pulling out copies of the documentation. As I distributed them to the board members, Wilson lost all pretense of professionalism. That's enough, he shouted. The team stays. You go. Security will escort you out. The boardroom fell silent. I nodded, gathering my laptop with as much dignity as possible. As I walked toward the door, I heard the shuffle of chairs behind me. Turning, I saw Jordan stand up, followed by Amber, then Garrett. One by one, 11 engineers from our project stood and moved to follow me out. Wilson's incredulous expression turned to nervous laughter. Sit down, all of you. This is ridiculous, he said, but the engineers continued gathering their things. As we reached the door, Wilson's phone chimed with a text. He glanced down, and I watched as the color drained from his face. He looked up, scanning the room frantically, then back at his phone in disbelief. What he didn't know was that 7 more engineers had been waiting for a signal. They hadn't been in the boardroom, but they had received a group message from Jordan, now. Wilson's text had come from Eric. I quit too. This project can't succeed without her team. 18 key team members, including all the core architects of Project Quantum, were walking out together. Wilson had just lost the entire brain trust behind the $175 million project, and from his expression, he finally realized what that meant. As we filed out of the boardroom, heads held high, I heard Chairman Walker's stern voice behind us. Alan, stay exactly where you are. We need to talk. Now. The hallway outside the boardroom erupted into controlled chaos. Board members emerged, huddling in urgent conversation while executive assistants rushed past with phones pressed to their ears. We gathered in the large open workspace near the elevator bank. The 7 engineers who had not been in the boardroom joined us, along with Eric, whose face showed a mixture of relief and apprehension. What now? Garrett asked, the reality of our collective action setting in. Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Catherine Morgan from Apex Solutions. I heard what happened, she said without preamble. My offer stands. We have workspace ready for all of you, starting today if needed. I looked at the faces around me, a team that had just risked everything on principle. Let me confirm with everyone and call you back. After a brief discussion, the decision was unanimous. We would accept Apex's temporary workspace while considering our long-term options. No one wanted to return to Wilson's toxic leadership. As we prepared to leave, security guards approached, looking uncomfortable with their assignment. Mr. Wilson has requested that you all leave immediately and turn in your badges, the lead guard said apologetically. Jordan stepped forward. We were planning to do exactly that. We surrendered our badges and exited the building together, a procession of 18 engineers carrying laptops and personal items. Several colleagues from other departments watched from windows, some raising hands in silent support. By the time we reached our cars, industry news alerts were already buzzing on our phones. Mass exodus at Tech Fusion. Engineering team abandons $175M project. That was fast, Amber remarked, showing me her screen. The tech world runs on gossip, I replied. By tomorrow, everyone will know. We caravanned to Apex Solutions, where Catherine Morgan herself greeted us in the lobby. A slender woman with silver-streaked black hair and sharp eyes, she exuded calm efficiency. "Welcome to Apex," she said, leading us to a recently renovated floor with abundant workspaces. "Consider this your temporary headquarters while you decide your next steps. No strings attached." "Why would you do this without guarantees we'll join Apex?" Jordan asked directly. Catherine smiled. "Because talent like yours doesn't become available often, and because I've had dealings with Alan Wilson before. Anyone willing to stand up to him has both integrity and courage, qualities we value at Apex." Over the next 48 hours, the story exploded across tech media. Tech Fusion's stock dropped 15% as investors reacted to news of the team's departure. Industry analysts questioned whether Project Quantum could be salvaged without its core architects. Former colleagues began reaching out, some expressing support, others inquiring about joining us. Several admitted they had been looking for exits since Wilson's arrival had changed the company culture. On the third day, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Renee Edwards," a deep voice said when I answered. "This is Franklin Matthews, CEO of Tech Fusion." My heart raced. "Mr. Matthews, I'd like to meet with you and your team. Today, if possible." 3 hours later, Franklin Matthews arrived at Apex Solutions alone, having requested permission from Catherine to meet us on her territory. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes, he looked nothing like the confident executive from company promotional videos. "Thank you for seeing me," he began once we had assembled in a conference room. "First, I want to apologize personally for what happened. An emergency board meeting was called immediately after your departure. We've launched a full investigation into Wilson's management practices." He paused, making eye contact with each of us. "What we've found so far is deeply troubling. Wilson appears to have orchestrated a similar takeover at Nexus Tech, leading to that company's collapse after key innovations failed due to his interference with engineering teams." The room remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "The board has terminated Wilson's employment, effective immediately. We would like to discuss terms for your potential return to Tech Fusion." Jordan spoke up. "With all due respect, Mr. Matthews, trust has been severely damaged. What assurances can you offer that the company culture will change?" Matthews nodded. "A fair question. I'm prepared to discuss substantial changes to leadership structure, intellectual property policies, and compensation. But first, I need to know if there's any willingness to consider returning." We requested privacy to discuss among ourselves. Once Matthews stepped out, opinions were divided. "Why go back to a place that didn't value us until we left?" Amber argued. "Because it's our project," Garrett countered. "We built it from nothing. Do we really want to abandon it?" After intense debate, we agreed to hear Matthews' offer but made no commitments. When he returned, I presented our unified position. We're willing to listen, but we need significant changes, not just promises. Matthews laid out his proposal. "I would be promoted to Senior VP of Engineering with a seat on the Executive Committee. All patent applications would be corrected to properly credit original inventors. Eric would be removed from the project, with Jordan promoted to Deputy Director. New company policies would be implemented for intellectual property protection and ethical leadership. Most importantly," Matthews concluded, "we want to establish a culture where this can never happen again. We're prepared to make substantive changes, not just symbolic ones." The offer exceeded our expectations, but we requested time to consider it carefully. After Matthews left, Catherine Morgan joined us. "I heard Matthews made a compelling offer," she said without preamble. "I won't try to match it because that's not the point. The question is whether you can trust Tech Fusion to honor its commitments after what happened." Her candor was refreshing after weeks of corporate politics. "What would you do?" I asked her. She considered for a moment. I'd get everything in writing, demand structural changes that can't be easily reversed, and keep your network strong in case you need to walk away again. But ultimately, finishing what you started has value too. That evening I met with Sarah to review Tech Fusion's offer letter. The terms were even stronger than Matthews had outlined verbally, with binding commitments and clear recourse if conditions weren't met. After 3 days of deliberation and negotiation over specific terms, we made our decision. 17 of us would return to Tech Fusion under the new conditions. One engineer had decided to accept a position elsewhere, a choice we all respected. Our return to Tech Fusion was deliberately low-key. No announcements, no fanfare. We simply showed up on Monday morning, new badges in hand, and got back to work. The changes were immediately apparent. Stephanie from HR had been reassigned to a different division. Thomas Green, the former CTO who had stepped back for health reasons, returned as a special advisor to the engineering division. Most significantly, our access to information and decision-making processes was restored and expanded. Over the next 3 months, we worked intensely to correct the technical issues Wilson and Eric had introduced. Project Quantum returned to its original design principles, with security and educational effectiveness prioritized over superficial features. The investigation into Wilson's management revealed a pattern more troubling than we had imagined. He had systematically undermined successful projects at 2 previous companies, positioning allies to take credit while driving away original talent. The strategy had finally caught up with him at Tech Fusion. When Project Quantum successfully launched 6 months later, it exceeded revenue projections by 22%. Early adopter schools reported significant improvements in student engagement and comprehension. The technology press, aware of the backstory, published several features on the project's tumultuous development and successful resurrection. In the midst of these professional victories, I found personal healing as well. The stress-induced insomnia faded. My relationship with my sister Ashley improved as work pressures diminished. I even started mentoring young women in engineering, sharing lessons from my experience about standing up for oneself in challenging environments. One afternoon, I encountered Stephanie from HR in the cafeteria. She approached my table hesitantly. "Do you mind if I join you for a moment?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about what she wanted. "I owe you an apology," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "I failed to uphold the principles I should have defended. When Wilson presented his version of events, I accepted it without proper investigation." Her candor surprised me. "What changed your perspective?" "Watching how you handled everything. You stood up for what was right, but you never made it personal. You protected your team and the integrity of the work." She paused. "I'm trying to learn from that example in my new role." As she left, I realized that our stand had created ripples beyond just our team. Sometimes, doing the right thing influences others in ways you never anticipate. The final confirmation that Tech Fusion had truly changed came when Franklin Matthews announced a company-wide initiative on ethical leadership and intellectual property rights. The policy, developed with input from engineers across the organization, established clear protections for individual contributions while maintaining the company's legitimate business interests. "We learned a difficult but valuable lesson," Matthews stated during the announcement. "Our greatest assets are the people who create our technology and the trust they place in our leadership. We will never compromise that trust again." As I looked around the room at my team members, now expanded with new talented engineers, I felt a sense of vindication and hope. We had faced a crisis that could have destroyed our careers and project, but by standing together, we had transformed it into an opportunity for positive change. The industry was watching too. 2 other major tech companies implemented similar ethical guidelines in the months that followed, citing Tech Fusion's experience as a cautionary tale and a model for improvement. What had started as one woman's stand against injustice had become a catalyst for change throughout the industry. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say, but what you're willing to walk away from, and who's willing to walk alongside you when you do. 1 year after our dramatic walkout, Tech Fusion hosted a celebration for Project Quantum's anniversary. The educational platform had been adopted by over 300 school districts nationwide, with international expansion beginning in Canada and the United Kingdom. The event was held in the same boardroom where Wilson had ordered me to leave. though the space had been renovated with a more collaborative layout symbolizing the company's cultural shift. Board members mingled with engineers, and students from pilot schools demonstrated how they used the system. Franklin Matthews approached me, champagne flute in hand. "Hard to believe it's been a year. Sometimes it feels like yesterday," I admitted. "Other times it feels like a different lifetime." "I've been meaning to tell you," he said, lowering his voice. "Wilson tried to join Paladin Tech after we let him go. Their CEO called me for a reference. I simply told the truth about what happened here. And they passed on him. Word is he's struggling to find another executive position. Turns out, the industry values integrity more than we sometimes think." Across the room, Jordan was showing Board Chair James Walker the newest feature we'd developed, an emotion recognition system that adapted content based on student engagement levels. Walker looked genuinely impressed, asking technical questions that showed he'd taken time to understand our work. Sandra Thompson, the board member who had given me the opening to speak up during that fateful presentation, joined our conversation. "Quantum's success has changed how the board approaches technical oversight," she told me. "We now require regular, unfiltered access to technical team leads, not just executive summaries." My new role as Senior VP of Engineering had expanded beyond Project Quantum. I now oversaw all educational technology development at Tech Fusion, with a team of over 60 engineers. The mentorship program for women in engineering that I had established had already attracted 20 talented participants, with plans to expand. Amber approached with her daughter balanced on one hip. At 18 months old, little Sophia was already fascinated by screens and keyboards. "Future engineer in training," I said, smiling at the toddler. "She's already trying to debug my coffee maker," Amber replied with a laugh. "By the way, have you seen the latest adoption numbers? The districts serving lower-income communities are showing the highest engagement improvements." That had been our core mission from the beginning, to create technology that served all students, not just those in wealthy districts. The data validation felt like the final piece of our victory. As the celebration continued, I slipped away for a moment of quiet reflection in my office. On the wall hung a framed photo of our team taken the day we returned to Tech Fusion. 18 faces, determined and united, ready to rebuild what had nearly been destroyed. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Ashley peeked in, having arrived for the latter part of the celebration. "Hiding from your own party?" she teased, entering and closing the door behind her. "Just taking a moment," I said. "It's been quite a year." Ashley studied the team photo. "Remember when you told me you couldn't abandon the project or your team? I thought you were being stubborn and martyring yourself for a corporate job." I laughed. I was pretty adamant. "You were right, though. Standing your ground changed things, not just for you, but for everyone on that wall." She turned to face me. "I'm proud of you, Renee. Not many people have the courage to do what you did." Returning to the celebration, I was struck by how many small, positive changes had accumulated over the past year. The competitive tension that had characterized the previous leadership had been replaced by collaborative energy. Engineers freely shared credit for innovations. Junior team members were encouraged to contribute ideas without fear of dismissal. Franklin Matthews clinked his glass for attention and invited me to the front of the room. "1 year ago, Tech Fusion faced a crisis of our own making," he began candidly. "We lost sight of the values that build great technology companies. Values like integrity, collaboration, and respect for individual contributions." He turned toward me. "Renee Edwards reminded us of those values, not just with words but with action. When she and her team walked out that door, they didn't just protect their own work, they forced us to become a better company." The room applauded, and I felt a surge of emotion as I looked at the faces of my team members. "Project Quantum's success isn't just measured in revenue or adoption rates," I said when the applause quieted. "It's measured in students whose learning experience is transformed, in teachers who can better reach students who might otherwise fall through the cracks." I paused, gathering my thoughts. A year ago, we faced a choice between accepting injustice or standing up for what we believed in. It wasn't an easy choice, and it came with real risks. But I've learned that when you stand on principle, you rarely stand alone for long. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Franklin pulled me aside one last time. The board has been discussing succession planning, he said. I'm not getting any younger, and after what happened with Wilson, we're prioritizing internal leadership development. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning you should expect more strategic responsibilities coming your way. The company's future leadership should reflect the values that saved us from disaster. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the brink of professional disaster to helping reshape an entire company culture, it had been a transformation I could never have predicted. The most important lesson wasn't about corporate politics or technical expertise. It was about the power of collective action based on shared principles. 18 people standing together had accomplished what none of us could have done alone. I pulled into my driveway, noticing the light on in my home office. I'd left the quantum dashboard running on my secondary monitor, showing real-time usage statistics across the country. Thousands of students were actively learning through the system we had fought to protect and improve. That, ultimately, was the vindication that mattered most. Not the promotions or recognition, but knowing that our work was making a difference because we had refused to compromise its integrity. Sometimes the greatest professional victories come not from climbing higher, but from standing firmly on the ground you know is right, and finding others brave enough to stand beside you. Have you ever faced a moment when you had to choose between staying silent or standing up for what's right? What gave you the courage to make your choice? Comment below and share your story. If this journey resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring workplace stories, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening, and remember, your integrity is always your most valuable professional asset.